the agenda. Does anybody have anything that
We
they
need that, don't we?
are interested in adding
here,
on
I
there
got-
or
Everybody have their-
not understand or whatever? No? Okay, I'll move the approval.
Second it.
Second, thanks Jackie, all in favor. Thank you. And the adoption of the minutes, everybody had a chance to go through there from the last one? It's pretty short,
Yep.
a lot of numbers.
She was.
All right, I'll move to
No,
adopt.
she's in the same one.
Second? You got a second there, Jackie?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. And all in favor? Thank you, okay. I'm not gonna take any public comments today. I'm just gonna move right into the business. So, 4.1, principal architecture updates. Ready? Yeah, Drew, there you go.
That easy.
Yeah, right there.
It was easy to get to, but I was.
Okay, well, we're happy to be back here talking about this project.
Yeah, I'll say.
What did we come on? We came over a couple weeks ago because there were some ideas of revising the design of the community center slightly based on feedback from municipal staff.
Are we talking about the community center or just the office?
Well, just the office in particular, and that's what's up on the screen right now. And so we met initially with Sam and Shauna raised sort of some concerns that staff had come to her with in terms of the municipal office design. And so we took that away, made some thoughts about it ourselves, and came back and met a couple weeks ago with senior staff to go through a few different options to talk about what the issues are. And so thought we would just give a summary of where we were, where we got to, and present that as essentially what we would like approval for in terms of revising the municipal office design as we start moving towards tendering the project. Everybody on board? Ready? So this is the existing design and the areas that we were talking about. It started with, I guess, the building department, who, the way we had originally conceived of the design as a single reception area, community center reception area. The building department felt that there was just too much going on at this single reception area, and that it wouldn't work for the way that they're currently working. And
To clarify that, building and planning.
building and planning, yes. And so they had done their building plan reviewers and planners, and so they had their own ideas of what might be a benefit, and came to us with some sketches, and so we took a look at those, and essentially came up with this revised design, which slightly reduces the municipal reception area at this end, keeps the community center reception where it was intact, the way it was before, and introduces a second reception area for building and planning. And some of the reasons why that was important was that there's actually, it is a small building, and there's going to be a lot of activity at reception, and we kind of agreed that it would be a benefit to spread out that reception function. It means that there's going to be what we identified as kind of a signage issue in terms of sending people to another end to go to a different counter, or people coming in from the back door who are looking for the community center reception and might need to be directed. But I think
We'll figure it out after the first visit.
the overall opinion was that it would actually help have separate points of contact, where the building department's often meeting about very particular projects, having conversations over the counter, and to have that jammed up with the regular municipal business, it would just help by spreading those functions apart.
So for those of us that are physically space challenged, and how big is that green area compared to the area they've got in here now?
I don't know the answer to that because I don't really know this space that much.
It's similar.
Bigger or smaller?
It's smaller. Yeah. The
That's fine, that's all.
it's bigger than what we had allocated to them in the original design. The big moves that you see here is the open office space in this revised design is one module smaller than it was in the original. You see it includes the dark green there, so it's actually 4 windows. And then in the new design, it's 3, so the open office area is smaller.
Squish the windows together. But yeah, essentially what we've done is we've taken what was identified as building and created this new point of reception and shuffled the storage and copier over. And as you can see, we go to the next one. This is now an office, and so it makes this open office smaller. There were other options that we were considering, and some of the other options made that open office even smaller to the point where it was really not functioning. The whole purpose of us introducing this idea was to bring daylight back to these offices and to provide some open office furnishings area where you could reconfigure workstations in order to get more people in there. This is a much more flexible kind of open area.
So that is open office area.
This is open office. We've shown it with furnishings in it just to give you a sense of scale. Like these are little people, right, sitting at desks, give you, there's circulation through. What we talked about was still importance of keeping a dedicated closed door storage area. We're already like super tight on storage, as you know. So that was really important, including a space for the server and a space for the safe.
Is there room to do roller shelving in there?
No, I would say no. This is a small room.
Yeah, because that pink area in the middle looks very large in comparison to.
I mean, I shouldn't say no, it is possible. It's just, I'm not sure whether it would be worth it.
With roller shelving, you need a circulation space beside to access, to get into between the shelves as you're rolling out, right? So that
Well,
actually,
I've seen that they go up this way, so you can roll them that way and walk in the middle, or you walk down that. That's what I was meaning.
So this is the space that we've allocated for storage, and then we've also heard that the copier area, the way we had previously designed it, had sort of a more open layout area, similar to what's there now, and that really people would rather have that copy area enclosed because there's some noise coming from the machine and shuffling of papers and all that sort of thing. This is now kind of dedicated to building and could have up to 3 people working there. There would be obviously be a security grill kind of shutter, so after hours this would be closed. We've sort of made this circulation a little more generous, considering that if somebody came to planning, they had their plans, they wanted to have a meeting, they'd be able to come in through this entry and meet with staff and go into an office or a meeting room. So the whole exercise took a little bit of back and forth. This is a combination of a couple of different options that we looked at, but it essentially hits all of the points that we were talking about. And so this was sent to Shauna sort of following the meeting just to double check that we had covered all the bases, and we got the thumbs up.
so we should say that Sam gives a strong directive not to make the building bigger in this exercise, which we have not. So we're working within the envelope that we had before. We still have 8 enclosed offices, which we had 8 enclosed offices before, plus the CAO office and the mayor office / meeting room. So those things are unchanged. Things have moved around a little bit, so there are some minor implications for the structural engineers, for mechanical, electrical, and so on. So there's a little bit of work to do to the design drawings that the other consultants have been working on to bring them up to be current with these changes. And that's part of our discussion today.
Sorry, Dan, you had a question earlier.
Two questions, and then where this results for the group to hear. The overall square footage of the municipal component, has that changed?
No.
Okay.
Hooray!
Yeah.
Yeah.
And modules for the open office component, did they change per unit? They're still 68 square feet, or
Per unit? No, the open office is now smaller.
per unit? So I know it got smaller, but did the station itself change? What's the linear
Oh.
length of desk?
The
Did the linear length
stations,
of desk change?
yeah, the stations are all still the same dimension. They're
This
standard
is the
dimension.
same product?
Yeah, we didn't squish any of the,
Okay.
We had some kind of hot desk meeting space originally, which has disappeared.
yeah,
But
so
the actual- the
there's
actual
some
work-
space in here that was obviously sort of spent, and some space in here that was spent, and some space here that was tightened up. I mean, I can go back and forth like this, and you can,
So
sorry,
did you end up
get the idea.
altering the CAO's office a little bit?
Yes?
Yeah, it's
See right
smaller,
there?
it's smaller, you can see it.
And what we said was that it's going to be smaller than what was originally planned, and in a perfect world where, space wasn't so much an issue, that would be good, but if we're looking to maximize the use of the space, that we could steal some from the CAO's office, and if the CAO has a meeting with people more than 2 or 3, then the meeting rooms are there.
Correct.
Exactly, yeah.
So you can see in the CAO
It's
office
just for the
here,
benefit of those that aren't.
Yeah, that was part of our conversation about, does the CAO really need an office that big? And
No,
we had designed it to meet a need for small meetings, and I think we just kind of clarified what a small meeting is,
Right.
and that meant that we could save a bit of space.
Point is that we came to an agreement at the last meeting that we could definitely shrink the size of the CAO office and bring that space into the open area. Gives it better utilization.
Exactly,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah.
So,
So, did we answer your second question?
yeah.
The other, sorry.
okay, so, if I were designing an office for a law firm and accounting firm, thinking of the open office space, I've seen it, the last time I was at your place, a few years ago, I guess. How would that compare in the size of the offices and the amount of open space? I mean, I hear conversations now about people that work out of the office, so you don't need a dedicated desk and stuff like that. And
Well,
I don't
the-
know whether we have people that,
Excuse me.
I think most of our people are here.
We have
All the
clients
time.
that range all over, from completely open to hotel to a split of what you have, some sort of balance, depending on the operational needs.
Yeah,
And all of these workstations are a minimum L format workstation. So it's not as if we're saying, well, everybody needs, 2.5 feet in order to fit their laptop and be able to work. These are all set up as units of workstation that are L-shaped. So,
there's also a recognition that actually many of the staff are not full-time. They're working part days or 2 or 3 days a week, and so some of these workspaces will be shared. It's probably, I didn't quite understand the question of comparing.
well, if
These
I were a
offices to,
voter
a
and I'm
local
looking
office.
at the money being spent, and I've just rented new downtown office space,
Right,
and office space is expensive,
okay,
and I know, the sizes, you just need a place for a desk and a filing cabinet,
right.
or the L shape, and maybe 2 chairs, max. You don't need a lot of walk around the room. I mean, that room, this one on the left with the 2 people in it, I don't know what that thing is, the greenish sort of one.
In the
This
open
one?
office, in the open office.
Yeah.
This one, what's that?
That's a person.
Well, they're just standing there?
Yeah.
So,
Okay,
there-
so why
there-
would this office wall not be there?
because there needs to be opportunities for instance, that wall could be a full height storage wall with bookcases running up to 7 feet or something,
Yeah.
as we have on the opposite end of the open office space. So we're trying to provide some flexibility. This is one possible layout of
Yeah,
open.
this whole open office area, other than minimum code requirement for circulation, is, yeah, in fact, the circulation could go straight through if we really wanted to, but it makes more sense.
Yeah, that's.
The other thing I think is worth pointing out is that we actually spent quite a bit of time previously in the original design exercise understanding that an office would be sized to either be kind of a director private office or sized so that you could have two workstations, two staff people in a closed office. And we use that as a sort of commodity, so that they're all sort of democratically deployed, and they can either be private offices or shared offices.
So these the enclosed offices are, we would say, a minimum for the uses that have been described. There's no, there is no sense of there being a lot of extra luxury in any of these areas.
What are they, 10 by 12, 10 by
No,
14?
they're 7.5 by
Oh,
11, something.
Okay,
wow.
all right.
How much bigger than this table?
No,
Well, that's why we added the people in, just to give you a sense of
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
scale, because there's gonna be a lot of activity, well, in this whole building, but in this office in particular.
Okay.
I guess I would just pick up on what Drew was talking about in terms of coordination with the team. You will know that we have, everybody on the team is at least at 90% of construction documents complete. That's when we put the project down. And what that means is that there have been several sheets of drawings made in order to describe the previous design. And those are coordinated across the team in terms of mechanical, electrical, structural systems, all the exterior window elevations and sections. And so there's quite a bit of work that's been invested already in the previous design. And so to make a design change at this stage in the game is difficult.
But it's easier than during construction.
Well, and
Or
it's definitely easier than during construction, and now's definitely the time to do it.
Yeah.
And what we've tried to do through this process, working with Shauna and the staff, is to minimize the impact on construction cost in particular, because construction cost is really what is the big ticket item. But there will be a design cost implication for each of the consultants in order, even if the consultants don't have to do the work, their drawings need to reflect all the work that we're doing as well. And I just wanted to highlight that shouldn't be underestimated. It's actually quite a bit of work to go back to each of those drawings and make sure that you've updated everything so that it's coordinated.
So a little bit of what that means, we talked about the open office space, closed office space. Just a reminder to everyone, the open office space has a vaulted ceiling, and the closed offices have flat ceilings. So what that means is we have a different area of open and flat ceiling in this scheme than we had previously, which means that the roof structure is different in this scheme than it was previously, slightly. So that needs to be reflected in the structural drawings. The skylights that are located in the slope ceiling have to be configured in this new configuration as well. And then the lighting for the slope ceiling area will be different than in the flat ceiling areas. And we've got offices in slightly different locations. So the lighting, the power, communications, all of those things that are being delivered to those areas, and the electrical drawings needs to be revised as well. So that's the kind of scope changes we're talking about. It's not enormous, but it obviously it's critical that it's all properly coordinated.
Did they have vaulted ceilings in the office building before?
Yes,
I didn't bring any of my old files.
yeah, there were always vaulted ceilings in the
Yeah.
open office area.
Yeah, it's the same design concept. It's just at this stage of the game, in order to make a change, you have to make that change on like tens of different pages in order to make sure that they're all coordinated, including exterior windows and elevations and interior elevations and products and that kind of thing. Specifications.
So just wondering, in terms of the cost for these design changes, including what you're doing as well as the consultants, is that within our contingency? Is that where that's going to be coming from?
It will have to come from the BICC. It's a change unless there is additional funds coming to the project. And we don't have approval
do
yet.
we have
We don't have a cost estimate or approval yet to move forward.
So I was going to say, what an estimate, we don't have the estimate yet for those costs.
For the consultants, we do.
Yes, so what we asked consultants to do, and we just are sort of gathering this up until yesterday, or this morning. So they're not hard enough to kind of present as a full cost, but essentially we asked consultants for a few comments on their fees. The first question is, the project has been put down for a year, and is there any cost associated with picking this project up and carrying on? So that's the first number, and we're gathering that from each of the team members. The second question is, given this municipal office change, what would your fee be to update your current documentation in order to include this change for tender? And the third question is, we haven't completed the tendering phase or the construction administration phase of the project. It's now, was it 3 years later, from their original fee proposal. Is there any change in order to sort of cost to complete for those two phases? And so currently we're gathering those numbers together. From what I can tell, the first two numbers are easier to get. So the startup cost is roughly 20, 25, I'd say 22. And the municipal office change is about the same, 20, 22.
Correct.
The cost to complete, I think we have some questions to ask consultants based on the numbers we got back. So I don't really want to give you that number. I don't think it's real. But I think in terms of today, I guess the goal of today is really to get approval for the design change as a design, and approval for the design team to carry on documenting that design. And I would suggest that if we put 44,000 as a number to it, that would include what the consultants have come back to us with.
And that will get the project back up and running. It will get this change implemented across the board for all of the team members, and enable us to then enable us to move into completing the tender stage so we can tender the project. We're anticipating we're going to be needing to do that, relatively soon, hopefully.
Yeah, and then I guess the other cost obviously is, well, what kind of construction cost change would there be? And short of doing an estimate, I would think there'd be a very slight increase. I think we've maintained the same building footprint, the same building envelope. What we're talking about is interior partition work, a security grill or screen that might come at a bit of a premium, but otherwise, I would say the actual change to construction cost would be less than the design cost, that's for sure.
Yeah, it should be a wash.
All right, well, that's good news.
Yeah.
So any other questions on that?
Just to say, we recognize, I think staff brought to us a good rationale for doing what has been done here.
Makes sense.
Separating the two reception areas. We had been operating under some other assumptions in the initial, through the initial design. we were wanting to consolidate all the reception function in one space because it's a relatively, this is quite a small office. We felt that made sense. The other side of that coin is, this is quite a small office, and there's going to be a lot of traffic trying to use one space, and by separating that, we kind of get around that issue. There's a recognition that Daniel, for instance, when he's meeting with clients, he may meet them initially at a reception counter, but then he wants to bring them into his office. If he's up at the front reception and his office is at the back, we've got the community walking all through the offices all the time, and that really didn't seem to work very well. So we solved, I think we've ticked off all of the really sort of key important boxes here, and at very little change in construction cost.
So to that point, would you say that the planning reception will be also at the back?
That's where it is.
Yeah,
it is.
So that green area
Okay.
is the building office, that is the planning.
Building, planning, and
That's correct.
building.
And our anticipation is one of those 4 outside offices there
Yes,
would be
Yeah.
Daniel's office.
One of these,
yeah, I would think so.
And he can duke it out with the other 3 people to figure out which one it is.
Yeah,
I think operationally, it is a little bit trickier because there will inevitably be people who walk in and say, I need to get a dog license, or somebody might not walk in here and say, like, I like my development permit. So there'll need to be some signage, I mean,
Yeah.
but people are gonna come in and wonder all sorts of things, I'm sure.
But they can be sent to the other
Yeah,
district, it's
exactly.
not a big deal.
signs up. So where is the rest of the planning department, the planning staff, where do you see them?
We have intentionally left this, we're staying out of
Yeah, well,
these
Not already in the
workstations
store.
will be moved around all,
Yeah.
and so that's really,
There have been several exercises where staff have looked at this, and also the senior staff have, there are some other things that we don't know exactly how this will be ultimately configured, where one or more of those offices will actually be subdivided into too many offices. It will depend from case to case on how much privacy is needed for the person who's working, who they're working with, how much proximity is required to other people in their department, and so on. So,
yeah, from a design, architectural point of view, what we want to make sure is that we provide sort of flexibility, democracy of workstation size, and essentially create an outline so that it can be populated in a bunch of different ways depending on our staff setup.
Just make it versatile enough that can serve any purposes, because they like to have those big tables in it too. That's always nice for the maps and stuff.
And
Yeah, well, then,
that's why the big golden green area.
That
Yeah.
big one in the end, yeah.
Well, they've got the meeting room too.
yeah,
That's true. Yeah, yeah.
I mean, there's
It's
2
just
meeting
like
rooms
slide
there
what they're
that
for.
we do not have in this space.
Yes, yeah.
Plus the council room, which is the only equivalent of what we have in this space. So
right.
there's no reason, I go downtown for a meeting with somebody now. You don't meet with them in their office, they've booked a meeting room, and there'd be 4 little meeting rooms off the reception area, and their office is probably, an open office type thing.
Yep.
But,
No, I think that works, that's awesome.
I have a question about the timeline, so assuming that we decide to make the change, and then how long does it kind of take to revise the drawing? With everybody's, with structural, mechanical, and all that.
Yeah, we didn't actually get into timeline because we thought that we actually had quite a bit of time before tender, and we were looking at June or July, I think.
Yeah.
Are you going to go through the,
Because of the
Schedule next.
referendum in the
Yeah.
middle of all of it.
so I don't think timeline was ever really an issue.
Okay.
The only thing would be, I can get clarification on that, especially if you're wanting to go for a Class A, which includes this. So if you're going for Class A cost estimate that needs to be sort of tender ready and include this, then it won't be next week, but April-ish sometime. I guess, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you guys need 44K approval and 44K to get things rolling here.
I think so.
How much money have we got left in the pot?
Everyone's looking at Raj.
Then we took a garage. Not by there.
And Raj is
It's over
going,
there.
I don't know.
Who's following the dollars?
Yeah.
It's been a long time since we've all got around the table and talked
Yes.
about where the project's at and where the budget's at. There's generally a planned budget, whether it exists currently or not, in terms of the municipal allowance of spending in our approvals, is something we've have to go back and obviously talk about. But there is a planned contingency for the escalation due to the delay. We've got to double check to see where that's at, and I don't know, I think it's actually on here in terms of, it's not, but we have reached out to our PQS, our quantity surveyor, to,
From the closed.
okay, but we have reached out to them to get them up to speed of where we're at, in terms of remobilizing, and that would have some input into their scope of work, obviously,
Yeah.
but they're aware of that.
Okay.
Long story short, there is contingency plan, it's whether or not it's applicable for use,
Mhm.
based on our current approvals.
So I guess, but we still need approval from
I
this
think
going
what-
ahead, which I don't think is an issue, sorry.
I think what you're doing is approving the expenditure, Gary, because in terms of the budget question, the project has a total project budget of $14.5 million. That's not a
Correct.
project budget for costs that are coming up. That's for the entire project
Yes.
per se, from including money that's already been spent. So you're not looking for new budget approval because the budget is already basically spoken for or
Correct.
approved by council. It's approval of payment of the 40,000 is what you're probably
Authorizing
wanting.
expenditure.
Yeah.
Okay, so just to be clear, this is extra work that wasn't included in the original construction costs and
Sure.
architectural fees and
This is
all that
all
stuff.
risk contingency.
So we've got a little pot at the bottom called contingency. And I guess my question is, how many times over have we spent that pot? We haven't. So
We haven't.
how much have we taken out of that contingency already? And we're not putting the contingency at risk for the construction cost contingency by taking more out of that
I'm
pot.
pretty sure we have a design contingency before we even get to the contingency.
Okay, so
Yeah.
did we have a design contingency?
Yes.
Something that's already in the budget that was earmarked for this kind of thing?
It wasn't earmarked for this kind of thing, it was for other,
Well, I thought there was a design contingency.
this is an owner's requested design change, this is not a design risk contingency. So it can be used for this, and there is a budget for it, there is over $44,000 in it.
And is there any other use to come up for that we need to keep some of that pot for?
Generally, it's important to keep some design contingency even during construction, because there's gonna be changes during construction that we have to also consider engaging the design team on.
Now, why would there be changes during construction other than
This is
we change our mind?
fairly typical in the construction process. It could be a coordination issue on the drawings, it could be something between the owner and the design, that's a change of coordination or information that needs to be revised. So it could be a consultant issue, it could be a consultant contractor, new information found, or it could be an owner request. Those are the three reasons why we generally use
The
them.
water supply, booster pump, backup generator, design, there's a certain amount in there, but we have new information about after the water test was done, and so there might be additional design work needed to complete that design that wasn't in there originally, so things, yeah, there's design-directed changes, which are sort of, you can decide whether you want to do them or not. Then there's things that we'll encounter that we don't have much choice about that fall under contingency.
On these changes, if this is what the owners are saying they want it to look like at the end, we have to spend the money to get the drawings changed to reflect that. So
Yes.
it's
Yeah.
really not discretionary.
No.
We need the wind-up money too.
Okay, so going back so I can understand the timing, to make all these changes to the drawings, is going to take how long?
I would say, month and a half, 6 weeks.
So that's
So-
your middle of April
Yeah.
Yeah.
date, and you're talking about, but there's other work on the drawings that need to be done to get them from 90 to 100.
Yes.
Yes.
So that would all be done at
That's
the
all
same
part of that.
time.
Yeah.
So you're gonna be incurring more time that's already in, that we budgeted for in your total contract
Yes,
price.
yes.
That's good, that's
Which
good.
hasn't been spent yet. So I guess we're back to the catch-22. Until we hear about the grant, do we want to authorize spending any more money? Which is, it's more than, the 44 is for this extra bit, but they're actually, to go from 90 to 100 and get ready for tender documents, they're going to be spending more money, but out of the other design pot.
Which has already been
Which
approved.
has already been approved and
In the global picture of the schedule.
I know that amount has been approved,
Right,
but
right.
there's one thing to approve spending it. The other is to be prudent in spending it, and I guess I
Right.
still have this problem of, we haven't heard about the grant, and if an answer is no, then it's gonna be, really, I'm gonna feel, I don't know how I'm gonna answer the question, well, why did you go ahead and approve spending an additional 44, plus, I don't know whether it's 25 or 50 or what of the design budget, before you knew you had the grant? So,
I
you
think,
know,
I don't want to give a flippant and quick answer, but my immediate thought is that if the steering committee wants to have the due diligence of understanding the total costs of the project and keep the timeline of a summer procurement, then they should move forward with this work now, because there is work for the design team to complete, and then quantity surveying to do the due diligence on the total project cost. And without that work being complete, the project will inevitably be delayed.
so if we
Yeah.
heard about the.
I would think there's actually a cost to not moving the project forward, which is your escalation cost, but also your lost opportunity for tendering a good time to tender. I don't know if you can put a price on that, but I think what Sam's maybe alluding to is that you want to keep this thing on track so that we're not waiting for absolute assurance before we make the next step. Otherwise, that timeline could go on for a really long time.
We haven't talked about all the steps in the schedule. We've been looking at this for some time, but we need to try to meet a number of target dates through the process. And if we delay this piece of work to hear about the grant being approved, it's going to have other ramifications in that schedule all the way along. I think that's, and the biggest concern, the one that Craig has pointed to, a summertime tender would be
Oh.
ideal.
Well, a spring tender, a late spring tender would be better
Would
than
be
summer.
better.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, so all this work would be ready by April 15th, is
Yeah.
what you're saying. So is that tender-ready documents, or is the tender still have to be developed after that?
No,
Well,
that's,
I think maybe it's worth talking about the bigger, like what all the other factors are that go into the schedule, because when we mapped it out last time, it actually extends out a little bit.
There would be other collaborative work between the design team and Bowen required to complete the tender and release the tender onto a public bidding platform like BC Bid, because depending on the cost estimate that we get back and any analysis about what we want as cash allowances or any other components, we would need to put those into tender documents, but that would be in the specification and front end, not so much on the drawing component. So this work is for the drawing component.
Yeah.
I would think that if the choice is to do a Class A cost estimate pre-tender, you would also want to include a period of time after the cost estimate to,
Revise the document.
well, yeah, like make changes that are cost savings. If you don't meet the target that you want to meet, then there's an exercise where we need to ask the tough questions about what can we leave out, or what can we phase, or what can we reduce in terms of quality, or, and so if we're doing a Class A estimate for that reason, then we need time following that estimate to make some
value
good decisions.
engineering.
Yes.
And the 44 doesn't include the Cost A estimate,
No,
so that's another
Well,
That's part of it.
we will provide all that documentation.
That's a
And
different
then
consultant.
it's a different consultant.
Yeah, but we still have to add paying that QS into the
Correct.
budget, which would again come out of the contingency line.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the 44,000 doesn't include your fees as well?
It
It
does.
does.
Oh, it does?
Well, it's their fees for, but
So the
their fees for the
44
regular plan work
Right.
is not in the 44.
Well,
That's in the budget already.
what's included is the startup costs and the revision costs of the design for all the consultants.
Excellent.
Including ourselves.
And then what it doesn't include is an update to the design team for the tender phase and contracting mid phase, because what they have in there right now is 3 years old.
Based on a smaller project and a different construction cost estimate.
But in terms of the rationale for spending this money now, it is part of that design process that had been approved, that we approved to spend that
Correct.
money to get to this point. So I think in response to those questions, it's.
Yeah, but I guess when we
There's a
put
rationale
everything on
behind
hold,
it.
we were thinking we were gonna hear back in December, so we'd have lots of time, time to still make
Well, I think we should move forward. I don't think there's any question about that. Any other remarks? David, you got anything down
Yeah,
there?
I just got a question from staff. I haven't heard from staff. So does this meet the concerns? I mean, is it it's worth making the change? Is this what you want? Does it work from staff?
the office.
Yeah.
This
I think
meets
we
the,
should-
I mean, the change is right here.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
44K.
yeah, this meets, I think, the feedback that we heard from staff and then from building and planning, and
I think not just building and planning, when we had the managers meeting talking about it, it was
Yeah.
sort of the general consensus of like intent as well, to separate
Yeah.
this would be better.
would be better, and maintaining that community center reception is, yeah.
Okay, yeah, in that case, I'm supportive.
All right, do we need a resolution or?
So those two.
Yeah, I think we need a
Was it in there?
resolution. Move to approve the design changes.
They have changes in rationale and implications of changes. We need two motions or just one? To approve.
Cover all, and do joint.
Go for it.
It's one motion to approve the design changes as presented and authorize the
And
expenditure
authorize
of
the
40 up to
expenditure.
44,000 to revise the drawings accordingly. Right?
Yeah.
Well,
Yes,
that's
that-
not gonna decide on
Sorry, let's do my bad here.
So Shauna, did you make that motion?
I can make that motion.
I can second that motion.
Okay.
What do you got, Sophie? What does
I
it
got
sound
that
like?
the community center select steering committee approves the design changes as presented and authorizes the expenditure of $44,000.
Isn't it
Up
up to?
to.
Up to 44.
Yeah, up to 44,000.
Up to $44,000 to revise the drawings accordingly.
Yeah.
All right, I'll move that. Second? Okay, I'll take David, and any further discussion on that? All in favor? Thank you, that looks unanimous to me. And the second part?
And that was two.
That's
That's
it.
That was all in there?
That's all of it.
All as one.
I know you've all voted on that already, but did you want it, I mean, it just says to revise the drawings, did you want to put out, it includes startup
No,
of the project
that's
as well, or
another
no?
motion entirely.
Okay.
Well,
Or it
44,000,
includes startup.
the
That
startup,
includes
startup
Startup.
and
It's included in
reworking are, they're hand in hand.
It's,
Yeah.
it's
We-
to
we
start
can't-
the drawings, you need to start up.
We
Yeah.
can't revise the drawings without having the startup money, so they,
Oh, yeah.
right.
But
Yeah,
I
the only
guess-
number that it doesn't include is for the next phases,
Yeah.
which is
Contract administration.
actual tender, the tender period,
Construction documents.
And-
tender.
contract administration, which is when it's in construction.
Okay, well, that makes more sense, so we're at the startup right into it.
And we'll get back to you with that when we tidy it up, but I just didn't want to bring it unfinished.
Okay, so I think that's it for that 4.1. 4.2 is the project timeline, and that's over you, Sam.
Well, there is,
Have you talked to Hope, because your document and Hope's don't match?
there's a timeline
I
attached.
did talk to Hope.
I can talk to that a bit. Fairly well.
Yeah, we
There's a schedule on the back with some diamond shaped milestones, and there is another document from January 30th from Hope regarding the referendum process and borrowing process timeline. We did develop the project task timeline, as Greg mentioned, with Shauna working through some process steps, adding in this redesign component, the climate lens reports, announcement of the grant, targeting that milestone for the middle of this month. And if you overlay this information with the referendum and borrowing timeline, that aligns with the received inspector approval on Hope's schedule. So those two timelines are generally synced up, those two milestones are synced up.
So Hope actually developed this timeline based on what?
Well, I saw
On
that.
the draft
There
schedule.
was, I've got to find the email I sent her.
The only change, if I can jump to the bottom line, that's a variant between Hope's schedule and ours, and the project task timeline, is that the last line on Hope's is the short-term borrowing approved by MFA. That's looking to have a start date as a single date, so there's no duration there, July 30th. And that would change, that would be a change from our award, the general contractor CCDC2 contract, which is targeted at the 22nd of July. We would have to move our award of general contractor's contract to after the approval for borrowing. So
Your washing period doesn't match with hers either. You've got June 6th and she's got June 17th.
she has quashing period May 18th to June 17th.
And you've got the quashing period ending on 6 June 20, which is June 6th in my calculation, which is 11 days earlier than the
Right.
17th.
That's probably my fault, because I didn't factor in the coming to council for the adoption of bylaw and municipal security issuing resolution before the quashing period. I did the quashing period from May 9th, which is just what I need to do. So hopes would be correct in that.
So does that push off the gate preparation? Is that a council date for a vote? I wasn't sure what.
The gate 5 prep?
Yeah,
What is that?
Gate 5 preparation would be a steering committee meeting like this, so we can review all the materials and give the steering committee an update of where the project is at. It's an internal project management type workflow, that steering committee gate 5 preparation. The issued for tender documents and sort of gate 5, those two activities are tied together. They're not necessarily part and parcel of your readings, and
So we could have council approval subject to no quashing period problems in advance of, we wouldn't have to wait till after June 8th. We could have a subject
Yeah,
after
that's a
June
good point.
17th.
The approval first.
But we could approve it with a subject,
Yeah.
provided there's no issues raised during the quashing period.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That'd be good.
This
I'm assuming June 8th is a council meeting, that's why you have June 8th.
Then she gets.
yes.
Yes.
So apology for my ignorance on this, but what is the quashing period?
If somebody wants to attack the validity of the bylaw or the process,
The process.
You
Yeah,
have
of
four
course.
weeks
Like,
in which to do
if the
that.
referendum is successful, then somebody could go appeal it, right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Well, they can try and
It's a
challenge
bylaw.
themselves
Irregularities or something.
on the basis of due process wasn't followed.
Okay.
So I think it
Thank you.
could, what it could change there, if there's a direction from the steering committee, we could hold the issuance of the tender till after June 17th. That's only a few days off where we planned June 8th tender release, if there's really any concern. Otherwise, you have a tender out on the market, but there could be a concern brought up through the quashing period for a few days. So that's the only non-synchronicity between those two elements. between these two schedules. There was a bit of overlap there.
So when would the tender documents preparation start?
As soon as the $44,000 are approved, which just occurred. it's when the
Oh,
tender
I'm sorry, I
happened already.
totally missed, I thought the 44 was revising the drawing.
Yes, those are tender
It
documents.
is,
Yeah.
Oh.
and carrying on with the amount that's already been approved, which is to go to,
So
Tender.
you are
90,
gonna proceed with
95%.
taking the drawings?
That's correct.
yeah,
At
Yeah.
the
we are now.
completion of this piece of work,
Yeah.
the project will be ready to tender, unless something arises out of the costing exercise.
But I thought that was only
said-
remobilizing costs were
No,
included in that
that's half of that.
44.
Half of that is remobilizing, and half is,
Revising.
But remobilizing to me meant in order to to make the office changes in the drawings, they'll have to pull it.
so
get their
remobilize
lines
and,
back.
remobilize and
Spooling up
complete.
again.
Let's.
We separated it because remobilizing needs to happen regardless. It's been a year since we picked up the project, and people have different staff, and there's all sorts of things
Yes.
associated with starting up. So that's why we separated as one number, and then the actual direct revisions for this change to municipal is the other half
So 44,000 is made up of two things?
Yes.
Correct.
20 for the startup and 22 for the changes.
of that. 22 for each.
And then
Okay,
plus-
but just remobilizing doesn't necessarily mean you're gonna start working on anything other than changing the office drawings.
The drawing, no, that's a separate piece. So the office drawings is one piece,
Yeah.
so that's like a new piece of work.
Okay, well,
and
remobilizing.
what we're calling-
Well, then
what we're calling-
I'm cha- I
What
wanna
we're
change
calling
my vote.
remobilizing is getting the team back up on the project and picking up and completing loose ends related to the tender.
From 90% to 100%
Okay,
back to.
I was thinking you would not start the 90% to the 100% until we got
Grant approval.
grant approval,
Understood.
which we're hoping might be the week of the 15th of March.
Yeah, but do you want grant approved or do you want a referendum? I mean, where do you?
Well, I guess
Yeah.
I'm willing to go enough out on the limb that if we get the grant approval, we'll probably get the rest.
If you'd like,
All
if
the
you'd like.
changes associated with remobilization are for the changes to the municipal office space.
There you
The
go.
team needs to remobilize to update the municipal.
Well, I'm getting two
office
different
space.
stories, so which
Well,
is it?
I'm with Sam now in order to keep things moving along, because they're gonna have to remobilize in order to do these design changes anyway.
That's what
So
I
if it makes
thought.
you feel better.
No, because
Yeah.
now I don't know which is the story.
Well, they have to remobilize in order to do anything on this
I
project.
knew that, and that's what I was assuming was what you meant by
Okay.
remobilizing.
We-
Now
we
you're
just
telling me
separated
The design
that
for
Right.
one
as soon as
building
they pick up their
and one
pens, they're
tender
gonna
package.
start on the tender documents,
Okay.
So,
which
yeah,
is not.
Well, that'll be part and parcel of it.
So the mid-March date, I mean, that's news to me. Is that something we actually know
Well,
about? or is that
no,
another
I
hopeful
guess
guess?
the
It's
issue
another
is,
hopeful guess.
the grants went in at the end of November.
It's okay, Allison. It's okay. It's another
And-
hopeful guess.
And my guess is there's a week's, looking at the
Yeah.
parliamentary calendar, they're off for the week of March 15th.
We had to do this planning work, we had to draw a line in the sand somewhere, and
Yeah. fair
So
enough.
that's why we picked that one.
Okay,
The next week off is in the middle of April.
yeah.
The one thing we didn't map out before was the idea of Class A estimate and potential value engineering.
right, and we shouldn't necessarily, at this point, plan for value engineering, we're not ready to talk about that. We have contingencies, we have a plan, we have budgets, we have a design.
Still
Your design
fundraising.
stayed within the envelope, you moved some walls around and you changed the vaulted ceiling location. In fact, it looked like it reduced slightly, so if anything, maybe your structure is a little bit simpler, less complex.
right.
It's more the time frame of escalation and the market conditions that we know are probably the larger risk to the project.
Right. And hence the reason to do it.
And hence to do either a Class B with,
Escalation.
there's some discussion to be had there on whether we do a Class B or a Class A, but that's a different point of contact.
Can I just ask about the time frame for escalation? That should only be from last year to now, right? Because when we went up to 14.5 million, we had taken into consideration escalation up to last summer. So, I mean, even though we started planning 3 years ago, I remember the meeting
Yeah.
where we had to take in escalation into consideration.
We,
So,
but we can, escalation's calculated to the midpoint of construction, and essentially we have changed our tender date by several
Okay.
months. So it's those months,
Yeah.
variance or that delta.
Yeah, no, I recognize that for sure, but it's just the escalation won't be from 2015 or
No,
16 or
no.
wherever, it
The
should be
delta-
from 18,
the last-
like,
yeah, the last
yeah, from
time
the
we
last
adjusted.
time we adjusted the budget.
Correct.
Exactly, and the
Okay.
delta would be,
Yeah.
you know, I think
Okay.
we're talking about a January procurement, and now
Yeah.
we're talking about a
July.
July,
Okay.
August procurement. So it's those months
Okay.
of escalation,
Okay.
the tail end.
Okay.
Sam, how do you feel about tender issuance on the 8th of June? As opposed to January? I mean, not that we've got a choice, but I'm just saying that.
On the
we've
availability of people
We've
to
experienced that
bid.
before where when you go to tender, June, July, it's already, companies are busy with construction. And we're told that, that's not the best time if you had a choice.
I think it's kind of like finding a cooking recipe on the internet. There's lots of different ideas. The best way to get good market response from a tender, whether it's June 8th or January
Yep.
8th, is about communications and engagement and awareness and outreach.
Perfect.
I think this project, because it also has a community engagement component with the fundraising, is great. It's not going to be a surprise to the industry or the market. Part of the next steps of having the referendum will also be a good component of outreach and time to share with the market. I know in December, I had a lot of phone calls from contractors in the industry calling me because they knew that there was something coming in January, so they checked in. And so it is out in the marketplace. I know that this project is waiting for this grant approval. And so there are a lot of hungry folk waiting for this type of small municipal project to happen. As soon as they do, they are going to be ramped up for it. So I don't think that there is too big of an issue. The only issue is you're on an island, and we have to make sure that those contractors that are keen to work over here are still open and engaged working over here.
I think it's also a unique project, and so it,
Need something to have your signature added to with, by unique, you mean?
no, I mean unique in terms of its setting, its funding source, its reliability, its sort of design. And so it's not like another residential condo where you have to time it right because everybody knows exactly what they're doing. Like, people will be paying attention to it, and I think you're right about invitations.
There's
That
quite
kind
a
of thing is gonna
few,
make the difference.
I would say, large and mid-tier firms interested in this project, even though it's only a $10 million project, right?
Filler project.
So
Thank you. That gives me the comfort I was looking for.
still going to be wishing for the best, right?
So can we just come back to the timeline, because we
Yes.
didn't actually decide if we were gonna switch that June 8th under tender, the June 8th date to June 18th, which would then put us beyond the washing period for the tender.
At this point in time, I don't know if we need a decision or direction,
Okay.
because we're still have a milestone on the announcement of the grant that's all hypothetical. We have some time to make that decision and analyze the cards we get dealt over the next couple weeks.
Okay.
I think the risk there is also measured as being very small. If you like, I
On
would
the
probably leave it
washing
on June
period.
8th. I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't worry about that 10 extra days for the
No, or
washing
the
period.
date of the tender,
Because it's
issuing the
also-
tender document.
Yeah, it's the tender period, so.
So tender period, not
it's not-
tender
it's just-
documents.
Yeah,
So the quashing period will end before tender ends.
right, that's important.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's key. If we
Oh,
get
okay.
some major
Yeah.
cannonball, we have an opportunity for an addenda, and a change of direction during the tender process. Worst case scenario, that seems unlikely.
So going back to the open house dates, I have no idea why you picked those dates, so I am assuming those are not set in stone,
They're not set in stone,
because
but
they're both the same day of the week,
Yes.
and they're, yeah, and so you're not, I don't know, just thinking about the different audiences you're gonna have to appeal to.
yeah, we sort of just picked some dates, they weren't set in
Yeah.
stone.
Yeah.
But we picked some dates, there was
But-
some logic behind them, in terms of their timing, obviously within their predecessing activities, and also to give some time for the design team to be able to prepare between open houses in case there's anything we need to, so they're not back to back, and that was important. And there was enough time between the what we believed was enough time between open house number 2 and the referendum voting day. If there's
But
thoughts
they're
on
both a
change on that.
Monday. You know, why is there not a Saturday morning or a weekend where you would get,
There could be.
Could be.
the weekenders
We
where
just,
you would
there's
get.
a certain window,
The
there was
people that work.
just simply a window that we were working with, and to getting
Yeah.
2 evenly spaced open houses in that window. We can adjust one of those onto a weekend without any problem.
And, you know, looking at,
There could be more or less as well.
Thursday night
We
ones.
set
Yeah.
2 as a working plan to put forward.
Yeah, I
There
mean,
could also be some ferry engagement,
Yeah,
again.
yeah,
because we
our
had talked about that
communications
as well.
isn't really
so
there.
that's just sort of placeholders then,
Yeah.
not set in stone. Yeah.
It's a work plan that we had to communicate to the consultant team as well, so they knew what their work.
Yeah,
plan
so
was.
basically more it's open houses during the period blah, blah, blah.
Week of.
Yeah.
Well, you've got the 2-week period here.
Yeah.
So that's more for timeline. And then the other question I had asked Hope in my email, there's no dates in her process. Are we doing mail balloting?
Yes.
So mail balloting's accommodated in here, in the timeline?
I don't know about this.
No, Hope's
So the one that Hope provided, yeah, she would.
Because she didn't write mail ballots available or mail balloting in here, so I wondered. And I thought it
No, I
added
think
time
that's,
on the
it was
timeline.
more of a high level, so that's like getting down into nitty gritty kind of referendum timeline.
Okay,
So-
but I somehow thought mail balloting was a little longer because of the voting list and,
They go out a little earlier, don't they?
yeah.
I thought they did.
Okay, so mail balloting is common.
So just in summary, the only then change to the project task timeline will be to award a general contract after the short-term borrowing approved by MFA. Is that acceptable?
That 22nd of July?
30th.
30th
Go
of
to the
July.
30th. And that's just because you've got the wrong date for
Oh, I see.
the quashing period.
No, that has nothing to do with question period. It has to do with availability of funds and commitment of a contract.
Short-term borrowing approved by MFA.
Okay, so that, do they actually do that at a board meeting, guys?
Honestly, I couldn't answer that, I don't know.
I had a feeling they did.
All right, so what was that again? Sam, what is that?
Well, I'm looking at
July 30th?
Hope's last line,
Yeah.
short-term borrowing is July 30th.
Yes.
And then on ours, we have award general contract, the CCDC 2 contract,
Yeah.
a stipulated price contract. It was previously the
Oh,
22nd of July. I
Yeah,
think
yeah, yeah.
we probably want all our finances in a row before we award a contract.
Yeah.
I would leave the timelines as presented. Allison's asked the question, I may know, but I'll follow up, but it won't change anything for today.
No. All right, so everybody happy with that?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure, is everyone, because I went clear on the gates, I mean, if you want to, sometimes the gates are confusing, so if there's any questions on the gate process, you know.
I've given up trying to get you to make it make sense.
Don't go there for my benefit, I'll just ride along.
Wait till June,
Yeah.
then you can ask about dates.
Correct. Are we there yet?
That's what I have on schedule, is there any other?
Is gate 5 the last one we have to do with council?
No, there's
So
gate
six.
six.
Gate
Oh, that's
6
right.
is
Six
where
is
we
to award,
approve the signing of the.
Okay.
Gate 6 is actually the big one.
yeah.
Oh,
But it
so
says
gate
with steering
6
committee there.
is with, what's steering committee?
Yes.
Yeah,
And that's meeting the week of, and then the award is July.
Currently, the tender is planned to close middle of July.
yeah.
And then we would come back with those bid reviews. It's
Okay.
most likely an open tender we haven't done tender documents yet, but I assume there could potentially be a tender opening,
Public opening.
public.
Now, July
Here in this room.
22nd is a Wednesday, which is not a council meeting date.
Okay,
And council would have to authorize you awarding the tender.
not sure on that, but.
Yes, Raj only has $50,000 expenditure approval. It's gonna have to come to council.
Okay, so should we add a?
You're gonna have to get some time in
council
there
meeting?
for a council approval.
And the council meeting would be July 27th
No, that works.
or July 13th. Then
just
it's
slip it
Monday
in
the
there.
20th, so I think you have to make it the 27th.
Wonderful, that aligns
That's
very
perfect.
nicely.
Yeah.
So that would be council approving awarding the tender, awarding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The-
The announcement of the grant is the critical path item, I guess.
Yeah, everything's gonna change. if that
Everything
doesn't
is,
happen.
yeah, the whole schedule
Trigger.
will change depending on when that announcement.
Because it'll change the referendum.
So
Do we have this set up in a way that we can just?
Yep.
Hopefully.
This is in a Gantt chart format, but for the purposes of reviewing it, it's often easier just to look at a spreadsheet.
Great.
Pop it in there.
We're gonna publish the second timeline there. I was just looking at it, we should, very last line of it, it should either say temporary borrowing or long-term borrowing. It's not short-term borrowing.
It should be temporary, wouldn't it?
It should say temporary.
We're not going to, we're gonna do construction draw type borrow, right?
That's all the way through there, Raj, or is it above as well, and it's below?
It said temporary up above, so temporary is fine.
Well, so how does everybody feel about those timelines? We got them all reasonably well organized.
So contingent
Have
on
we
the
talked?
grant and.
If we can move things up, because the grant gets approved tomorrow, then.
Yeah.
Then yay.
I think I think at this point in time, the referendum process and the grant are the critical path. The
Yes.
design team is off the critical path at this point
Yeah.
for their work and the tender documents.
Everybody's happy with that. We'll move on to 4.3, which is referendum support. That's back to you, Shauna.
Yes, so we've been talking with the design team about support to the project through the referendum and leading up to the referendum, just to be able to get as much information to the public as possible and engage with public engagement. We do have a bunch of communication that's pretty much ready to go that Helen has been working on, so there's some mail drop leaflet with lots of information. It'll have the referendum dates and that kind of thing, newsletters. There's been a lot of social media lately, that's just to kind of bring the project back up into the forefront with the anticipation of the.
Yeah, which side, social media? People asking questions, or are you just?
The social
No,
media
us
is-
putting
issuing
issuing
posts.
social media. Helen's working on a newsletter. We have we have a press release all ready to go as well, so that once we hear about the grant, we're ready to move forward with communications. But just in terms of the open houses and how we would like support from the design team, that was just a conversation we thought we would have here. And one of those being if we would like a physical model of the building prepared for the.
It's not currently in the budget.
It's not currently in the budget, and were you guys able to do a quote?
We believe that it would be a useful tool to have. Many people can't very well understand or read a drawing, even if it's a three-dimensional drawing. We've got some interior views and then one sort of finished exterior view of the building. With a physical model, you can walk around it, you can get down and see how things are, how they all
Or you could have
work
one
together.
without a roof,
Sorry?
one without a roof, so you could actually look down inside, or you just
It
have.
can be done that way, it's
Or
quite
you're
a bit
just
more
talking
expensive.
about
We're
a
just talking
model
about a
that
lot of
shows
the
the
exterior,
outside.
yeah. in
Yeah,
itself.
I think there's a number of different ways to do it. I know we sort of floated the idea and promoted it, but we haven't spent a lot of time putting together an estimate for it.
Is there a
Sorry,
ballpark?
I didn't realize we were gonna be talking about it.
No,
Is it-
I think
yeah, just even
I
a
think it's really, really important. A lot of people just can't visualize that space, and if they're given something that they can actually, wrap their brains around, it sure makes all the difference, I
I
think.
think we
It's
were
kind of
talking about
it's
it.
like the building in miniature.
Yeah.
And a drawing never quite gets there,
No,
But the 3D renderings?
even.
3D renderings, I think the purpose of the model wouldn't be to communicate things that we are already communicating with other means
Right.
in detail. This would be more of how it relates to the play field and the topography and the road going down the side and where it's gonna sit in the land and how much space is gonna be around it.
yeah.
And the building itself will probably be a small massing kind of thing. But it also helps just give the project a bit more legitimacy, right? It's like when you go to City Hall and you're pitching a development permit, you've got something that people can stand around and wonder
Yeah.
about.
So is it, how big are we talking? Is it, did you say walk around it, so, yeah.
Yeah,
So it's
walk around
good,
it.
we
Let's
could
say 4 feet by 4
transport it, we
feet.
could take it to the ferry, on the ferry. So I think
Yeah.
from a
Yeah, they said 4 feet
fundraising
by 4 feet
perspective,
so that we could move it
Yeah.
around.
from a
Right.
fundraising perspective, in terms of building our case for support, it would be a wonderful tool to have. But again, just ballpark, any idea?
I think we had been talking about like 3,500-ish,
Oh, okay,
4,000-ish.
okay. All right, so we
But-
certainly have money in the fundraising budget that we haven't spent, that's been approved to date, so. maybe
And I think
that
what we were
would
talking about, we came up with a whole
allocate
list
there
of kind of referendum things, menu items that we could help with, and through sort of establishing a global budget, realized that, well, I mean, there's a bunch of stuff that's actually already really describing the building already.
Mhm.
And so it would be best to focus any additional money spent on something that's gonna make a big
Yeah.
impact.
Mhm.
And so, we've been organizing to get the example flip-up seats from Hussey.
Right.
Yes,
so-
they will be arriving this week.
Yay.
Wow,
finally,
well, that's
yeah,
awesome.
The correct one.
Great.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
correct one.
The correct
Yeah,
ones,
yeah.
yes.
So-
Yeah, I mean, I think those type of things that I'm thinking, and they could be at the co-cons, in either the annex or the gallery, model, and.
Yeah, just
people-
sit
and-
there,
Yeah,
yeah.
and then with some information, and people,
Yeah.
it would definitely create some buzz.
I think.
Great idea.
This is
We can
really
move it around.
important. This has been too long. It's been going on for a long time, and
Yeah.
this makes it something,
We need a
instead of
spark.
theoretical, it becomes tangible.
Yeah.
And tangible, like, when people vote, a whole lot of it's emotion. And suddenly you see something that's tangible, and it's hard to vote against something like that, because obviously it's kind of cool and nice, and it would be good to be there, and then it becomes harder to vote against, I think. And I think the tangibility part is really important, because this has been on and on and on and on, talked about for all the 20 years that I've been here. So this is,
The other sort of
this makes it
tangible
puts it in a good
thing
place.
that we identified that might be helpful is kind of a material sample board that's a little bit abstract, but just has
Yeah.
some of the kind of materials and
The roofing,
feeling.
the siding,
Yeah.
Just to give people a
color.
sense of the quality.
Yeah, I think it
Yeah.
brings people closer to the project too,
Yeah.
when they start seeing those.
Just don't pick a color that isn't what it's going to be.
Yellow.
I remember the West Van Library, the model was one color and the plaque, you didn't tell us it was gonna be that color.
The other thing about the theater seats, we haven't seen a sample, I believe it will be 2 seats. And they should, hopefully we'll have the correct one with the correct seat, the correct size. And an example of both the chair number and the donor plate location.
Nice.
So again, this is a part of the whole marketing exercise, the idea, the concept being that the seats are for sale, if you will. You can buy a seat.
And you can test drive.
And you can test drive.
Yeah, Helen's ready to kind of launch the seat sale again, once the seats are here and we've heard about the grant.
Right.
That'll be one of the first fundraising pushes for that.
It's just a question about fundraising. So will we start, I think with the announcement, will we restart fundraising as
Yes.
well? Like presumably, we've got some people who
Yes.
said, if it happens, I will.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so that starts up as well.
Yeah.
We also have a letter ready to go to current people who have pledged, and because basically saying that we will be having a referendum on May 9th, for example, and now we'll be coming to collect those pledges
After the
What?
referendum.
after the referendum.
Yeah, I think that's good. And I think the other thing is we just have to, just emphasize the fact that if we do get this grant, or within $2 million, the referendum is basically for $2 million for the public, the community, and.
Well, it's for
that's-
4, but 2
it's-
is tax
well,
neutral.
It's
Yeah.
not, the other 2 isn't gonna cost.
I know, but don't say to people it's for 2 and then they're gonna get in the ballot box and say, why the hell have I got 4 down here?
Well, okay, agreed,
We
but
will
if,
explain it.
for people that are thinking at all, then, and if we can reduce that number, then I think we're, every little bit we reduce it is gonna be really positive. But I think, as far as the model is concerned, I think that's a no-brainer. I think there's so many people that can't understand it. And if they can't understand it, they're not gonna back it, so, and I think they can look pretty sharp, those models.
Yeah.
So do we need to pass a motion to ask that a model be created at this point, or do we?
It sounds like you already have a fundraising budget and it fits within it. So maybe we can just continue to work
Right.
with you.
So-
Budget, I think we can just go ahead with.
So I think the committee has to just
I
agree
think-
that we want to.
Can I make a suggestion? Maybe it's a different conversation, but what will be important for us in terms of keeping track of our finances, whether it's within a budget or not, is a proposal from
Yeah.
the consultant team with an as and when list of referendum support costs and an estimated budget for each of those line items. 1, a model, 2, updated 3D graphics, and 3, material samples board, and 4, any other sort of communications material that you guys have been discussing that you might not be party to right now. And then we can work within either an approved budget or the project budget to see that those tasks can move forward, depending on their priority and need.
I thought the samples would be free, they're not their samples.
It's-
See,
those-
I got a pretty good deal on the samples, but it may be a cost.
We do got a,
It looks like $350, but it's refundable.
Yeah, there you go.
You can't just push a button and
Let's-
generate it
let's
like you can with a gun on.
one day we'll be able to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Give
I
the-
Okay, you
thought
got-
I
we've
saw
got
something-
material.
I thought I
Fundraising
saw
committee
something
authority
in the
to
museum
move
which
forward.
actually was showing that.
So Gary,
Generating
you need a
building
motion?
materials, digital.
As Sandra suggested?
Generating a
Print.
print.
To request a proposal from the design
Yeah.
team for.
They're just not super great
Referendum
materials.
support,
Yeah.
just called referendum
Yeah.
support.
We just had
Okay,
somebody here
reference
last
support.
week.
And
A
to give
model was a
the
3D
fundraising
printed
committee
model.
authority to.
We
Yeah.
use,
It's
we use
something with
the,
land and geography.
yeah, it's
Topography,
it's
pardon.
great for that. It's great
Yeah.
for modeling topography.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're doing
So you
it
just
to
do that
the-
that with the box.
Oh, yeah, we absolutely.
So
I
it's
think
cards
it's,
all
I think
on.
it's a motion, the committee will pass a resolution
Okay.
to request a proposal for referendum support materials. We have requested proposal for cost. And there were 4 items, so you mentioned the model, updated drawings, 3D drawings, samples, and the 4th one,
Additional referendum support as well.
additional referendum support is needed.
So also attendance at the open house.
Exactly.
Attendance. You bet.
I think the motion is,
What if that gets rejected? Then we're not allowed to come.
the motion is to give the fundraising committee authority
to.
to work within their budget to get the referendum support from.
Can I be
the
a
town.
stickler about the term referendum support? I'd really prefer communication and outreach support during the referendum period.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah,
Wow, that's what
Thank you,
I
Sophie.
because referendum support sounds too, like, they're directly
Yeah.
helpful with the
Supporting.
referendum. Yeah.
Communication, fundraising support.
Communication and outreach support. Leading up.
So we're happy with the A part of that? Huh?
Yeah, and B, we've actually already done.
Have you? Okay.
I kind of went through them.
It should have, yeah, it was kind of part of 4.2, so.
The memo referendum and borrowing timelines. All right, we'll move on to 4.4, which is a business plan update. Again, Shauna.
So just to say that Raj and Allison have provided edits to the business plan that we had drafted. Jackie and I had worked on as a bit of a template, and we are going back tomorrow to work on some of the edits that we discussed and updating that with the new 5-year financial plan and getting it updated to where we're comfortable having it as a tool to use towards moving to that referendum.
Do you want me to leave you my binder with my chicken scratches on it? Sure. Before I take off for 3 days?
Could it be in an email?
No, I don't have the time to transcribe it.
Then yes.
You get the chicken
Then
scratches.
yes, I do want your chicken
Definitely take your
scratches.
chicken.
Of course you do.
Good review.
No, I know.
So it's being updated, that is the
Revised,
update.
yeah.
Okay,
And revised.
I like the update, it's being updated. When will that be available, do you think?
Well,
It's a fair amount of work that we need
It
to
is.
do, and then we'll probably want to meet with Rajan again, just to go over the changes, to ensure that we've captured everything, and in terms of whether or not
We're
anything
aiming
else
for
is
a referendum, hoping we might get a result by the 15th.
15, so it's
Yeah.
gotta be turned around pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Not
And
a
then it'll
lot
have
of-
to come back to this committee as well, review and.
What's the critical success or activity link besides opening the doors?
Yeah, it's opening doors, it's
I think
fundraising.
people, in terms of fundraising, donors are wanting to hear and see that
That's really important.
First and foremost.
before they commit
They
to
want to know that we
donation
can
and
pay for
pledging that we
operating.
can pay for operating
Yeah.
the building.
Has anyone at the ministry grant approval side asked any further commitments?
Yeah.
All right, and then 4.5, which is the climate lens assessment, Shauna and I guess Sandy
Yeah.
were involved with that too, right? Yeah.
So the climate lens assessment was completed by WSP Consultants, the greenhouse gas emissions report and the climate resilience report. And I received the final reports on Friday and have emailed those to Laird McLaughlin at the ministry this morning and spoke to Laird as well, and he has them. He said he would be passing them on to the federal government, and thank you very much, and no, he does not have anything else to tell me today.
No.
Are those available to review or distribute?
If
Or-
you want to review them, you sure can.
I don't think it's relevant to.
I'll do a project.
Is
look at a
there,
report.
is there a process, is there a process by which that's reviewed by the government and they come back with comments and,
Potentially.
We don't know.
because there may be some
Design.
implications to the design, is that?
Cost.
Not likely in our case.
What the strategy and process we took was there's two studies. One was a resiliency study and one was a greenhouse gas study. And we took the findings of the design work and the energy study we've done almost 2 years ago for the greenhouse gas study and used that as the base for their analysis and work in terms of the environmental conservation measures that we took. There's no, in terms of federal infrastructure projects, this project's kind of small. It's not a subway, it's not a big thing. So the greenhouse gas reduction studies are not massive, and there is no changes outlined in their report or recommendations for change in their report, but I can share that. So I guess, in short, the greenhouse gas study, it is what it is. It's more of a due
Confirmation.
diligence and
Yeah.
confirmation,
Yeah.
and no significant findings, I guess I would call them. And then I think the one that's more interesting is the resiliency study, which did do a lot of due diligence into climate change on the island and talked about water, availability of water on the island, fire, and there's a third.
Probably
risk.
climate, comfort.
Yep,
Yeah.
Water,
but
fire.
none of them
Heat.
are,
Heat reduction, like
Heat
having
reduction.
drapes
Yeah,
Yeah.
stuff.
yeah, solar control.
With solar control was a big one.
yeah, increased cooling capacity. And,
We have a.
but that one has the lowest sort of residual risk, and there are already sort of plans in place for reducing that risk. I think mostly it's good due diligence and information for the municipality
Yeah.
for operating than it is for the design team.
And it's also great fuel for response to questions, because lots of people will have experience with our language about resiliency and greenhouse gas emissions, and to be able to answer their questions, to say, this is the criteria that we had to meet as a project, will hopefully answer their questions satisfactorily, so that you don't have somebody, question whether you've actually done the good work.
And I'd just like to say thank you to David, because I sent the documents on to him for comment before we got the final reports back from WSP, because he does have that language and I do not. So that was
Yeah, I think it
helpful
is.
to have that.
A couple of comments here, and I think it would be worth looking at. The greenhouse gas one is pretty straightforward. It basically compares your project to a standard project, and shows it a little bit better. But members of the public might say, well, why won't it be zero? And things of that sort, like carbon neutral by 2050 and so on. So I think that's something you should have a look at, and that will be a question that people will ask, I think. The other one, the main issue on the resilience one, I'll say a bit more about the emissions reduction. The main issue about the resilience one that they thought was a little bit significant was water, but I'm not sure if they knew about the water treatment plant. I wondered whether they really understood what we were actually doing there, because they seem to be looking at the water system that we have right now, rather than the one we'll have in a few years.
Now they're using what we have now.
They're using,
So,
in this context, the study was now.
yeah, so in other words, the water one will be a non-issue.
Yeah, water's already a problem.
Yeah.
That's
In terms of resiliency, like.
Yeah.
The other thing on the GHG thing, it's that it's part of our plan in reducing emissions, since our emissions are largely from transportation, to have more on-island activities, so people aren't having to go to the mainland for stuff. I wrote a piece on the front of it to sort of say something about that, because that's too hard to quantify right now.
Yes.
And so it's not part of this study, but nevertheless, it was sort of mentioned that this is part of our plan, and it's an important. So I just wrote paragraphs at the front.
And it's in
to
the,
tack on.
in the introduction.
So
Yeah.
in this context, we're going to need another renewal of our building permit.
Another renewal, true,
Right.
yes, because another year will have gone by, but we're not
Yeah.
going to the updated BP.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
And I don't, we're still within at the moment, Bowen is still operating at step 1 of the energy step code, and will be until October. So we should still be within the general guidelines of the municipality with this project, with the recognition that we have actually done work and done modeling on the project to optimize it as best we could, given the project's type, if you will.
Yeah, like the building permit and the municipal choice around step code are kind of independent of each other. And so I think we'll still be within
Based on
both
that,
of those.
based on when we applied, I mean, going.
Well,
forward.
based on when we applied, we're gonna maintain our building permit and use the old code, which is one thing. Bowen's choice to adopt the step code, step 1, and even step 2, we should still be able to meet that requirement, even though it's not a building code requirement.
Right, just for clarity, we applied under 2012 BC Building Code. We now are operating under the 2018 BC Building Code, which is the code that has the energy step code entrenched in it.
Yeah.
So we're saying that we would be compliant with the new code, although we've applied under the old one.
Which is a good thing. That's a bonus.
Right.
That's a good PR thing for the community.
Yes.
Well, and yeah, it's more connected to what Bowen has decided will be their step code requirement, as opposed to the building code's step code requirement.
Yeah, correct.
I just have a question for David. I'm just wondering, do you think there is going to be concern in the community about our level in terms of sustainability of this and efficiency of this building? Do you foresee any issues arising around that? The general
It will come from some people, yes.
Definitely.
Yeah, I know at least one person would raise it.
Public buildings are generally aiming much higher now, net zero, carbon neutral, and so passive house. And so we're, in terms of that kind of target and that kind of technology, we're definitely Toyota as opposed to
And I'll add a little bit, is that we, council has passed in a committee of the whole, but it will then presumably pass in another month when it comes to council, a climate change plan that talks about being carbon neutral in 2050. So that means that any long-term capital, anything that lasts 30 years,
Yeah.
has to be carbon neutral, and this won't be. So it means you need some sort of offset somewhere to match up with that.
And we're encountering that on other projects already that
But
are.
I would
I
say
don't-
that.
Isn't that for new projects? They can't ask you to grandfather.
Well, sure, you can grandfather anything you want, but if you're gonna be carbon neutral by
Yeah.
2050, it means anything that's grandfathered and is over that, you have to have some sort of an offset, which we have.
Oh, I
of
see.
course. You could, yeah.
Right.
No, the question is the question gonna come up? And I think you're right, I think it will come
It
up.
will come out.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure it will.
And
It-
all other clients are developing similar that are requiring offsets as well. It's not like you can use, a generator for backup power and generally not have a solution for an offset.
Yeah. Did we make any facility for, or any plan to pre-wire like solar panels or anything? We talk about that to the public?
I don't think we
There's
did
there's
do.
spare conduit, I believe.
Okay.
Oh, we did do, yeah, we
I think
did
we did. I thought we
roughly
did.
for
Yeah.
solar PV.
Solar ready
Yeah.
and wiring.
Yeah,
Yeah, it would be
exactly.
solar
Yeah.
ready, but we won't be putting this.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But I don't know, don't hang your hat on that.
No, but
Right.
it's just the good news stuff that we
I hate to say, could you send me that
have to be
report?
able to talk about.
I'd like to see it, yeah.
So the
We're gonna have to
report,
respond to it. Communications.
is it a document that could be a public document?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's public information, it's not an
I would
easy
say both
read.
reports would be, it's a lot of data.
I know,
It
but
gets very
for
technical very quickly.
the people that are.
In the spirit of sharing.
Yeah,
Go
they're
our way.
open and transparent
Yeah.
and,
Confidential.
and
And
there
also,
are some people that are interested in that area.
well, and some people also will look at that and be like, oh, well, they've obviously done their homework.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they won't have to read it.
And those others that have questions about will understand some of the issues.
Yeah.
If they do it.
I'm thinking we're gonna need some stronger wording in terms around questions about that, specifically in terms of communication, so maybe we can draft some, work with you to draft
Happy to.
some,
I mean,
yeah,
similar
some
to
of our
the-
I
answers to
think
questions.
Jack is absolutely right.
Well,
Yeah.
it's been very
Similar
newsworthy in the
principle of
last
open
year.
house. We may
It's
want to
really
have
built
the
up
climate
momentum.
scientists there as well, if that's, or at least one of them.
Yeah, there you
For
go.
the authors of the report.
I was just gonna come back to the steps, given that
Yeah.
we're not starting construction until October, and in October, or thereabouts. In October, we go to step
Step
3
3, yeah.
as a municipality. We need to be able to actually say to people that we're doing that we're accomplishing step 3
Well, it won't be.
or step 2, because if we're requiring other people to do it, we haven't started construction, I mean,
Well, we still.
It's
then-
gonna be
then
tougher.
you know what I'm
Step 3 with
saying
this
is
building.
you need to, if you're gonna require other people to do it, you should also be abiding by it, given you're the municipality.
Well, I
Which
think
we won't be
that's-
abiding by it because it'll be colossally
I think
expensive.
there's two things here, Rush. One is, everyone has the advantage, the ability to apply for a building permit and not act on it for 11 months,
Which is what we're doing.
which is effectively what's happening with the municipality here. So we're following the rules that the municipality has established. I think the other thing we need to be cognizant of is, during the design process, we did model the building and we did tweak the design, and we were unable to achieve those kind of targets at level 3. And there's some reasons for that, and part of the reasoning is that this thing that Davis alluded to, where there's a comparison of the designed building to some normal building,
Like
some base model. A community center with an office component in it doesn't exist as a comparable.
Okay.
And that was our challenge. As a 1-story or a 2-story building, it's just a very unusual mix, where part of the building is used from, shall we say, from 8:30 till 4:30. Part of the building is used from 6 in the morning until 10 o'clock at night. There are heat loads, there are occupant loads, all kinds of things that skew the building back and forth all over the place. So getting a model that really that shows accurately how the building will perform, and you're wanting to see how it performs daily and monthly and yearly, it's just about impossible to do. So our engineering consultant said, it doesn't appear to us that it will meet step 3, but we actually can't even tell you that exactly.
So part of the reason was that when we did that analysis of the step code, it was very early days for the step code, and they did not have adjustments in place to accommodate for a building of this type, which is basically a single-story building of institutional program. It may actually be worth going back to revisit whether any of those criteria have changed to see if we might be able to meet it. But
It all costs money.
yeah,
Well, it all
Yeah.
costs money, yeah, it's, and I take your point. It
No.
would sure be nice, Raj, if we could.
Actually,
And
I
I think it's
appreciate,
a,
yeah.
and I think it's a communication piece that we're doing the best we can, and, you know, some of it is beyond
Yeah.
2, but not quite at 3, and there might be some parts of it that are at 3.
Yeah, more so than anything else.
But
Thank you for the refresher on that. I had kind of
I think it's
forgotten
a
about that.
communication piece,
Yeah.
which we have to be very aware of.
I totally agree.
I'm gonna move on, because you guys wanna get a ferry here. What time's the ferry?
5 to 3.
Oh, is it? Okay, let's see how this goes. So we're gonna move to a closed meeting. The committee times steering, select steering committee move to the closed meeting pursuant to section 90-1K of the community charter. Meetings that may or not be closed to the public. We don't have to say that.